welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jana Morishima, and I don't know, I'm the founder of Kids Comics Unite, but I'm just one of many. We have a team here who make everything wonderful happen. And today we are doing a Clip Studio Paint Roundtable that Jeff Larkin, who is a member of Kids Comics Studio, volunteered to moderate, and he put the whole thing together. But for those of you who are not members of Kids Comics Studio, I just wanted to put in a little plug and let you know that Kids Comics Studio is sort of like Kids Comics Unite taken up to 11. Basically, we have weekly events every Wednesday where we get together and we either have a presentation from an industry pro or we do an interview with a creator. We have office hours, we do live critique sessions, we have an accountability group that meets the first Wednesday of every month. And then we have this amazing archive of past events that we've done, which include every topic you can imagine, like understanding Amazon 101, or how to do your first Kickstarter campaign, or how to launch your book when you can only do it remotely, all kinds of things like that. And also self-editing and structuring your plot, what to do about the blank page, et cetera, et cetera. So the reason I'm saying all this to you is because Kids Comics Studio, it has been closed for enrollment, but it's going to be opening again in May, and we're going to be doing some events related to that. I think I might have saved some links that I'm going to put in the chat for you. Okay, hang on just a second. All right, the first link there is a blog post that I did where I kind of talk about everything that we do inside of Kids Comics Studio so you can learn what it's all about. And then the second link in there is a link to an event that we're going to be doing. I think it's May 23rd, which is basically an info session where I'm going to be going into much more detail about Kids Comics Studio and answering all of your questions. So I think, and then for those of you here who are studio members, I always talk about what we're going to be doing in the upcoming weeks. So next Wednesday is our live critique session. So as usual, if you have something you want us to look at and give you feedback on, it could be anything. It can be pages from a manuscript. It could be sketches. It could be your website, whatever. And then the week after that is our Lunch and Learn with Patrick Crotty, who is the art director for Random House Graphic. So he works for one of the biggest graphic novel publishers in the industry, but he also used to run his own small press. So he has a ton of experience in self-publishing. And the topic that he's going to be talking about next week is self-publishing versus traditional publishing. And I think he's going to be one of the most amazing people to be talking about this subject because he's done both of those things really in depth. And so he knows a lot about both of them. So I can't wait for that. Does anybody have any questions about anything I just said? Okie doke. I am going to turn the microphone over to Jeff.
Excellent. Let me share my screen here a second. Can everybody see that? And can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
All is good. Awesome. Cool. Let me just pull this out of the way. The Zoom bar here. And I keep getting messages about people coming in. Are you seeing that on your screen? I'll just take it.
Jeff, maybe don't worry about it. I think Lisa and I will try to keep pushing the button for people to come in if they come late. Okay.
I just don't want it to pop up on my presentation screen. So, but if you don't see it, that's fine. Hello and welcome everybody to the Lunch and Learn Clip Studio Roundtable. Yay! This is the second time we've done it. Last year was a lot of fun. And I'm really excited to be sharing these tips and tricks and these great presenters today. Our goals today are to provide you with some techniques, whether you're a beginner or a pro. I think we probably have a fairly diverse audience in terms of people's experience here. We'll introduce you to some tools you might not know and maybe show you new perspectives on ones that you do know already, and also lead you to some resources. There's tons of great resources online for Clip Studio education. The presenters today, I'm going to begin with sort of a process overview. Braden Hallett is going to do a color demo. Brigitte Blair is going to talk about customizing your iPad interface. Ken Rolston is going to talk about exporting to Photoshop and InDesign and his workflow with those programs. And Alberto Gonzalez is going to talk about using gradient maps. We ask if you could keep your questions until all the presenters are done. It might actually be good to, if you are going to post them in the chat, to sort of wait until later on, because they might get lost back in the feed. Somebody will be keeping an eye on that, but if you could also write them down, that could be helpful. All right, and after the event, post roundtable resources. This roundtable is being recorded, and there will be a replay available. There are also great online tutorials at the official Clip Studio site. The link is there. And there's also some great independent teachers like Ruben Lara and Kurt Michael Russell are terrific. They've got really great YouTube channels. And I've dropped a post in the Clip Studio Cafe chat board with some links to their sites. This presentation is going to have a lot of information. Some tools will be moved through quickly without showing you all the tool settings. So please feel free to ask questions either today or at the Clip Studio Cafe hour. We're going to start doing sort of, if all goes well, a bi-weekly sort of drop-in informal Zoom session where people can come and just chat and ask questions, share tips and techniques. It's going to be really informal. The first one being on the heels of this event is going to be on Friday at 12:30 p.m. EST, and hopefully bi-weekly thereafter, depending on people's interest and availability. And I will post a link to that Zoom meeting later today in the Clip Studio Cafe chat board. So if you're not already a member of the Clip Studio Cafe, sign up. It's great. People share tips and tricks, and now we're going to start doing live events with it too. Okay, so that's the intro. Now to my presentation. I thought it would be fun to make a little comic for today. Not quite finished yet, but here it is. Sign says Clip Studio. We pull back to reveal a mother dragging her protesting son into a barbershop. No! In the barber chair, the boy curses. Rah, 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 rah. But then the mother hands her boy an iPad. The boy discovers the hand scanning function of Clip Studio on his iPad. Hold still, Van Gogh. This is cool. All right. So still in progress, but these are the steps I've got through so far. Doing some thumbs, getting into some construction drawing, doing some inking, and now I'm at the flat stage. I'm not sure whether I'm going to continue going with this, but I'd probably add lighting, fix colors, do some more drawing. This is where I'm at. I thought I might show you the process of how I got to where I'm presently at. But then I looked at my comics last panel and I thought, hey, it could be fun to maybe get meta and go through the process that the kid in the comic is exploring, covering some of the 3D reference tools he might use, along with some of Clip Studio's other awesome drawing tools. So this is what the kid in the comic drew, an illustrated selfie. He got this posed, drawn, and posted on Insta before he left the barbershop. So I'm going to try and recreate what he might have done. First step, take a photo and import a really crappy posed sketch. Next step, create a digital avatar of that sketch. All right, how do you do this? If I go over to the left of my screen, I can pull open my palette here, and I see that I have a list of 3D assets in my material library. This body type asset, I know if I drag in this figure here, he's going to be too big because he's like an 8 heads tall manga figure. I downloaded instead a bunch of models that are proportioned to kid sizes. And I'm going to drag one in over into my layer palette, and he pops up right there. Now he's a bit big, so if I click on him, a ring pops up, and I can just pull the ring and bring him down to about the size of the kid on the left. I still like to do a little more customization of his body though. So if I go over to my tool palette on the right, I see full body. Let's say I want to make his head bigger. I can pull this down, click on the head, and then I can drag this crosshair up and to the right, and you'll see the model's head gets bigger. I want to make his shoulders bigger, so I switch from head, and I click on the shoulders, and I do the same thing, dragging it to the left, to the right, I should say. So that's roughly about where I want to be. The figure on the right was the target that I was going for, and he's roughly in that position. So the next step would be to actually pose the figure. And if I go to this layer, I can get rid of my library now. I don't need that. What I'm going for is this figure on the right. There's several ways that you can do that. On the first figure, what I'll do is I'll try just using a stock pose from the material library. When I click on the figure, a toolbar comes up, and at the bottom, you can see this little icon here with the down triangle. If I open that and then go to Use 3D Pose Material, my material library pops up, and I can just click on one of these poses, and the model is posed. Not quite what I'm looking for. Let's try on the second figure. So again, I click them. I hit the down arrow. This time, I'm going to use a photo or an illustration to get a base pose. I click Use Pose Scanner, and my folder of images pops up. And I'm going to try this one because it seems like I could do something with that. Click that and open it. The computer thinks, and the model takes on the pose of the 2D image, which is really pretty cool. The images that you'll get better success if there's a clear silhouette to the actual pose so that the computer can actually see the limbs and they're not occluding each other. Okay, so I'm sort of getting in the ballpark. What I can do now is I can manually pose the figure. I'll just click on it again, and you see these purple dots show up. I can just drag that into position of where I'd like the limb to be. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. You'll see that there are also these rings here. That'll rotate the limb around the axis that it's on. So maybe I'll do that with the head. I'm going to rotate the head in this direction a little bit, and then maybe you might pop it up to the side there. Another really cool thing is if I go out and then I come back to get the purple dots, this purple dot over here on the right, watch what the head does when I drag it around. It follows the dot as if it's looking at the dot. So I'm going to bring it more to here. And I'm getting closer. I won't get exactly what I did in the other pose, but one thing you can see is that I haven't posed the hands yet. And this is a new function in Clip Studio 2.0 that's really pretty cool. If I go back down to my toolbar, click that triangle down again and go to Hand Scanner, you see my other web camera that I have set up pops up. If I put my hand in front of the web camera, you can see on the model that I'm getting a live feed of what's happening in my hand. I've currently got it set to apply to right hand. So I'm going to make that devil horns pose. Click OK, and that's there. Now I can go back and do it again. But this time I'm going to click down and apply to left hand. And I'm going to make a number 1 sign and click OK. Now you can see that the tips of the fingers are a little bit bent. It didn't get it perfectly, but it's pretty close. It's enough to use for reference. If, you know, like Vince in the cartoon, you're maybe not that great at hands or posing.
What would you like, buddy?
Anyway, so this is getting close. We won't go through the modifications that I would do to get it exactly like that, but I think you get the idea. So what can you do with that? Well, the obvious thing is use it as reference. And to draw with, I like to always work on a vector layer for my pencils. I'm going to change to my pencil tool, which is the real pencil, and I can draw on my layer here. I tend to like to draw in a sepia sort of brown color. So I just change the color there, and I'll just sort of pose, kind of do what the pose is doing. And this is how I would build up construction. Now, the thing about vector layers, why I choose a vector layer over a raster layer, if I go to my layer palette over here, the place to choose it is up here. You can see if I hover over here, there's new vector layer and there's new raster layer. If I choose new vector layer to draw on, it makes my tool a vector tool. And that gives me a lot of advantages. One is that you can resize vectors without degradation. And the other thing is that you can use cool tools like the vector eraser. If I was to use a hard eraser and try and just erase this line that's going through his head, I would have to make, you can't really see that, but I would have to make multiple strokes. It's where this crosshair is over his head. If I change to my vector eraser and draw through the line, it will intersect up until a line that crosses it, which saves a ton of time. So I don't have to do all these strokes to take out a line. So that's a really, really awesome function. The other thing is, if I have a very textured brush, I'm going to paint at a bigger size now. Oh, I got to go back to my pencil. All right, let's say I've got this very textured brush here. And I want to erase through it. If I use a hard eraser, it will erase. Uh-oh, hang on, I'm having equipment. Bear with me 1 second. I changed my tool size with a third-party hardware device, and its driver wasn't working. All right, there we go. So if I do that, it's a very clean edge that you're drawing through. And I don't want that. So I'll go back to my pencil and I'll make a nice big stroke if I get onto my pencil. And you see that's a very textured brush. If I go to the vector eraser, and then I should say, if I stay on the real pencil and I switch my color to transparent, then I can pull through that and I retain texture. So that's a really amazing erasing function. It's called erasing with transparency. All right. So I've done some pencils and I want to get to inks. And I'm almost done. There's just a few more steps that I'm going to show you. I switch my pencil layer to a blue. And where are my inks here? Work here. And I'm going to again draw on a layer that's called ink here, and it's a vector layer. And one thing that's really important is to have, I like to have anti-aliasing off on my brush. This means that I'm going to get a really crisp line, and that when I go to use color fills later in my process, it will fill cleanly right to the line. So I'm going to take a black G pen and I'm just going to sort of draw over what was my pencil sketch. Now, I just want to show you really sort of bear with the crappy fast drawing, but one thing I wanted to show you about the vector capabilities of using a pen is the fact that you can change your line width after you've drawn the stroke, which is kind of amazing. Otherwise, I would either have to, if I wanted to thicken my lines, I would have to draw again over it, or I'd have to erase and start all over again. If I go to the object tool, I look in my tool properties here, I can see my brush size is set on 40. Let's change that to 6, well, let's go up to 70. And you can see that all of my lines got thicker after the fact. I'll change it back to 40 now. And let's say I don't want all of the lines. I just want to, like, let's say this side of the body has, you know, a shadow on it, and I want to thicken the line on that side of the body. I can use the correct line width tool. And if you see in my tool properties here, I have thicken set. And if I draw over the line that I've already drawn, it thickens that pen line. Conversely, I can hit narrow and it will thin the line. So I can do that selectively just on parts of my inking, which is kind of amazing to be able to sort of re-ink after the fact. All right, so those are the basic tools that I would use. I think Vince from the barbershop might add a few more, so I'll quickly go through what he might add as well. First off, he might add a gradient in the background with the gradient tool. Then he'd add some color flats with the fill, the close and fill, and the lasso and fill tool. Then he might add shadows with the flatting tools that I just mentioned and also use different layer blending modes. He might add some details to the t-shirt with a spackled paintbrush. Then he might add some really intelligent dialogue, rocking it with the text tool, the balloon tool, and the tail tool. And then he might just drop in the old Clip Studio sign with the old cut and paste. Of course, it's not complete unless he adds a signature in the bottom right corner. So this is where he began with. Just a plain old pencil sketch, and then he took it to that in the right. And maybe you don't need to use all those 3D tools to get the pose, but they're kind of fun to play with. And if you do have, you know, less experience with posing and foreshortening, it can be a great tool to speed the workflow. So that's why I imagine a kid in a barbershop might draw a selfie. And you know what? That's okay. Kids these days. All right, so that's it. Let's move on to the next presenter, which is going to be Braden, and I'm sure he's going to fill us in on some of the color stuff that I blasted through. Braden.
Braden, we can't hear you.
Hey, Braden.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
We can hear you now.
Excellent. Do I sound okay?
Yeah.
You sound
Fantastic.
like a disc jockey, Braden.
Well, that's good. All those years of opera training, right? All right, fantastic. So I'll share my screen here, and I will fill you in on my quick process on how I color. So, all right, cool. So now, to be honest, I haven't done any actual coloring in a long time because I've been working on black and white projects. So when I do coloring, it generally ends up looking something. You can see the two kids against the weird blue background, correct? Yes? Cool. Yep. Awesome. It generally ends up looking something like this. This is another project I'm working on for a kid's book, although that's kind of on the back burner. So also like this, but right now what I'm working on is black and white stuff like this and that. But the process to get to all of those different products is essentially exactly the same. So very simple. We're going to start with lines, and I'm going to shrink down all your talking heads because I can't get at my tools. There we go. Cool. So we're going to start with lines. This is Teddy. He lives in black and white. He doesn't want to be in color because he knows he's going to look bad. So we start with lines. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my magic wand tool. I hadn't thought this out entirely. 1 second here. There we go. Cool. I'm going to make myself a happy little layer underneath my lines. I'm going to set my lines as a reference. And that means the tool that I'm using, the magic wand tool, even if it's on any other layer, will say, oh, I'm supposed to be looking out for those lines. And it's going to go, bam. Oh, no, it's selecting the inside of Teddy. So what I'm going to do is just go ding with a tool and kablamo. I have a nice selection. I'm going to invert that. I'm going to fill it. And hey, we got a nice flat to clip things to. And if we zoom in, you can see without the lines, there's kind of a ragged edge. So what I like to do is I like to just blur that. Makes it a little better once there's something behind it. So close that up. Oop. Isolated shapes. That's right. So we have our isolated shapes. Happy day. Ooh, and that's another one tool I cannot live without while I'm doing all this is called the select layer tool. If we're on something where there's like a ton of layers, right? There's like a layer for the foreground, there's a layer for the midground, background, the trees, the plants, blah, 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 blah. You grab the select layer tool and you can say, I want to select that desk and click on it and bam, I've selected the desk. I want to select the foreground character. Bam, I've selected the layers on the foreground character. How about that plant there? Done, I'm on that layer now. So I don't have to go hunting through all these layers and folders. All I have to do is go, oh, that kid, where's he on? Ooh, right, there's his flat, neat. So that is one of the tools that I really cannot live without while I'm doing all this. So now that we've isolated our layers, we can make a new layer and we can clip to the layer below. And what that does is it makes it so that any other thing I put on top of the isolated color will not bleed outside of it. So now I don't have to worry about coloring outside the lines, and I can pick a color for Teddy. Oh, let's do purple. Why not? And what I do these days is I just kind of like paint it in. I don't bother with fill or anything like that. And if I wanted to, I could grab my fill bucket, my bucket tool, and I could once again put the lines as a reference, and then lo and behold, the bucket tool will happily refer to those lines. So that I can just clip, go fill. And that works great for more, flat line work and comic-y style things. And that's great, but I just like to paint because I can get interesting values by randomizing per stroke. Like I can randomize the light per stroke so that I can get kind of a more traditional look. Not that aggressive, but anyways. So we've isolated our shapes. We've been throwing down flats. We've got our flats. Next step is to add some value. So I have an easy way to do that. Pop another layer above my colors, clip it again. So this new multiply layer, which is clipped, won't go outside whatever's under it. I pick a shadow color. I can never remember what I pick. And I just, ooh, why ain't you working? Ah, that's why. I forgot to pick the correct layer. There we go. Once again, that layer select tool comes real handy when there's a whole bunch of them kicking around. But anyways, I'm just going to go down with the shadows. I don't know, there's some occlusion shadows there. I'm going to grab my blender, blend it out a little bit. Teddy looks so irritated. And you get some nice hard edges, some nice soft edges. This looks like garbage, but I'm going really quickly. So it usually takes me a little longer than this. And I'll switch to my transparent color to erase a little bit. I don't bother with the eraser tool. I just switch to a transparent color, which is really neat and handy. All right, cool. It's multiply layer done. I do a dodge layer for some light. Select an almost black color. Oh, wait, clip, there we go. And lo and behold, blend that a little bit. Right, cool. So our shadow and light is all done, and I've added a bit of like red there. So the next thing we want to do is put in some details. I mean, like, it's still kind of sketchy. So I don't know, what could we do for details? I could, where's my deets? There they are. Great. I like to kind of like cut things in a little bit with a smaller brush, Braden. And separate out the shapes. Let's say I really wanted to fill in that mouth at this point. That's where I'd be like, okay, that needs to be darkened up. And I'll follow this process for pretty much everything. Ding, 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 ding. You know, get some of those occlusion shadows really nice and dark. Maybe bump up some of that light. You know, the details. It's more like a paint layer than anything else. I just realized I was painting on the lines. I don't want to do that. If I want to give the nose a little bit of a bump, then I can do it on the detail layer and just go kind of like bump, bump. He needs one of those. If I want his hair to be like super shiny, I can be like, all right, let's grab some nice, amazing poppy color and like super shiny hair. I don't know what product he's using, but I'm jealous. Awesome, cool. So we've thrown in some details of some kind. And then it's really easy to add in a background. I actually normally do a background beforehand, but for the sake of this, I thought it'd be better to start with lines. But anyways, so then we throw in a background, which is super easy to do because we have our foreground figure isolated already, and we can just go underneath and go, you know, paint something in. That's my blue, there's my blue. And he's there already. And this is also the time when you kind of like, if it's raining, you would like throw in the raindrops coming off him and stuff like that. Kind of like blend the figure in with the background, if you get what I mean. All right, cool. And then the final thing I like to do is I just like to throw on some adjustments, which take the form of usually dodges. Oh no, there we go. Hue, saturation, luminosity. That's a real nice one. See, I was kind of like drab, gray, washed out, and I want to be like, all right, well, this is going to be printed, and I really need to make that pop a little bit. I do a hue, sat, and luminosity. So I can turn that off. All you do is right click, create new correction layer, use saturation, saturation luminosity. And from here, you can just play with sliders. No, not that saturated. Ah, that's black and white. Although it's kind of nice to check if your figures are reading RE value. So you can just bump it up a little bit, maybe a little bit brighter, maybe a little bit darker. And the cool thing is, if I wanted to be like, all right, it's nighttime, there's some like light shining on Teddy, I can do this, and then it comes with a mask layer. I can kind of like pick him out if I wanted some light on his face, but for it to be like super depressing otherwise, if you get what I mean. But anyways, so that, in a very brief nutshell, is my process. And it works real well for me. It's super fast, which is great when you have like 900 illustrations to do for a middle grade book. And yeah, I don't use some of the tools, I guess, that Clip Studio has, but I use a fair number of them. Does anyone have any questions? Or I guess, no, wait, we're leaving questions. That's right. Anyways, that's my process.
Cool. If you do have questions for Braden, definitely write them down and we'll get to them. Because I know if we open up questions, he just went through some awesome stuff and we could probably be here all afternoon picking his brain. But that's a very cool process, Braden. Thank you. So now we have Brigitte Blair sharing her screen. Take it away, Brigitte.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. All right. So I'm going to be doing iPad stuff. So there's a lot of different things you can do. Unfortunately, I don't have a top-down camera, so I drew some photos of some of the gesture controls that you can do. So just to kind of start it off, if you use your finger and you press and hold down on the screen, it converts to a color picker to make it really easy. Again, just a single finger. If you, let's say I drew something and I absolutely hated it. So let's say I'm on here, I draw something, I can use 2 fingers and I only have to tap once to get rid of it. And then I can use 3 fingers in order to redo it. Very similar to Procreate if you've been using that app before. Now, this next tool is the big thing, which will change your world if you're on an iPad, and it's called the Edge keyboard. So basically all you have to do, so from the very edge of your iPad, you just swatch over and then you're going to get all these commands. Let me quickly get this video out of the way so you can see it. Sorry. This is my first time doing Zoom on an iPad. So basically you'll see now you have a ton of different controls that you can use as kind of like quick shortcuts. So real fast, I'm actually going to switch it over to the left side again. All you have to do is you just swipe over. You can do it with a thumb or a finger, and then you just swipe back in order to get rid of it. So I'm going to quickly do it on the left side as well. And so now you have a ton of different tools at your disposal, which is going to make your life so much easier. So the first thing is the control tool. So the control tool, if I were to press and hold it with my left hand and I were to tap with my stylus, hang on, let me quickly do that one time. So I can actually use it as a color picker, which is super great. Another thing that I can do is if I use the shift tool, so you can kind of see here, it's very similar to the desktop version, but I can select multiple things. And then I can also, if I have, let's say, the pen tool activated, I can just press and hold shift in order to get straight lines, which is really nice. So I'm just going to quickly undo those. Another thing that you can do, which this is like really important, if you want to move and drag different tools kind of on your commands at the top, by default, it's actually set to control and then click and drag, but you can actually reconfigure that. So just to kind of show you what I've reconfigured it to, so I can click and drag these tools at the very top here. If you don't have that by default, which is usually the case, you can press and hold control and then select the tool. And then from here, you can switch the change order from command and drag to drag. So you can quickly change the order of the tools, which is really nice. Another thing that's really great, so the control tool is kind of like a right click on the desktop version of your Clip Studio Paint. So if I wanted to like press control and select an item, you'll notice how, oh, I can do all these like right click, which is super, super nice to have.
Can you just explain your setup? Because some of us are confused about like keyboard, like how are you doing this on an iPad? Do you have an iPad keyboard or how are you doing that? Some of the keyboard.
No iPad keyboard. This is literally, here, I'll hold it up in the video version. All I did was I just swiped over. It's a little bit difficult from this angle, but I just swiped over using my finger in order to get that to appear.
Okay.
And then you just swipe back to get rid of it. And you can do it either on the left or the right side, but you do not need a keyboard for that, just your finger.
Awesome. Thank you. All right.
Yep. Yeah, no, thank you for adjusting that. I appreciate it. A couple of other things which are super nice. So the command tool right here, you can actually press and hold the command and option on this left side in order to adjust your brush size. So just to kind of show you, this is it when it's big and then small, and all I'm doing is pressing and holding both of those in order to quickly enlarge and decrease it, which is nice. I can also do a space, and by default, it allows you to drag, so you can pan your screen if you'd like it to. And one more thing, I mixed it up. So control, you can set it to pick a color, but actually in this case, I've used option in order to select the color. So you can actually reconfigure all of these settings on the left side to make it really easy for you. And so I'll quickly show you how you can modify what the shortcuts are for this keyboard right here. So the first thing that you will want to do is you will want to go to the Clip Studio Paint logo at the top, and then you can go to your modifier key settings right here. And essentially this sets it so you can reconfigure all these settings on that Edge keyboard I shared. So let's say, for example, I want to switch what happens when I press Command. I can simply select Command, and I can go to where it says the settings right here. And then I can switch that to whatever I want to happen when I press that space bar on the left. So right now I have it set to select layer. So essentially, if when I press that and I tap, it's going to select a layer. You can also configure this for multiple press holds. So similar to what I shared with the Option and Command, when you press them both at once, it shows you how it enlarges the brush. You could also set that for maybe you want to press down Shift and Command, or maybe you want to press three things such as Shift, Command, and space and reconfigure what happens there. So it's super flexible. You can change it to what you like. I personally like to set it to, I really love the select layers using Command because, again, I use that so often. And then I love setting Option to the color picker. And again, all you got to do that is you just select the one and you can switch the settings to whatever it is you want to configure on the left, which is nice. So another nice thing is you have these T1s to the T10s. They're also kind of shortcuts, but they're a little bit more configurable. So if you want to modify what happens when you press one of them. So just for an example, to kind of show you, I'm going to press T10. So I've set T10 to show and hide the guidelines that I have. I also have a couple of other ones, such as my T9. It shows and hides masks, so I can quickly kind of see that. And so in order to configure these, it's in a slightly different place, but you can go back to the Clip Studio Paint logo. And then from there, what you can do is you can go to your shortcut settings. And in your shortcut settings, this is going to have a list of all the shortcuts that you can use across your project. Now you'll notice how some of these have Command plus N. This is basically if you are using a keyboard. So sometimes I'll use my Apple wireless keyboard. So you can quickly do those short commands that you typically would on a desktop. But if you want to use something like the Edge keyboard, all you would do is you would go to the one you want to change. So in this case, I showed you before, but I had that show mask area. So if you want to set it, I'm just going to quickly delete it. You can just click on the one you want to set for your T's, and then you can press it. So I'm pressing T9 right now. And then now it's set that specific one to my T9. So then when I press OK, I'm going to be able to use that. So you can really set this to anything. It could be as simple as like a copy. It could be selecting layers. It could be literally anything that's on the screen that's in the settings you can configure, which is going to save you a ton of time. Now, there's a couple of other areas that you can also do this because more commands is great. But we do have something that's called a quick access, which you're going to see on the top window right there. If you don't see it on yours, you can quickly get to it by pressing the window. And then inside of window, it'll say quick access. So if you select that, you're going to be able to basically get a ton of like really quick actions that you can use throughout the project. So it's kind of similar to setting the T1s through T10s, but it's a little bit more configurable and gets into some nitty-gritty specifics. So if I want to change the quick access, I can go click on that menu. It's called a hamburger menu on the upper left right there. And then you're going to see options. And from there, it'll have the quick access settings. So if you were to click on that quick access settings, now you can expand the ones you want to add. So let's say I'm using copy a lot for an example. I can simply press copy and then I can click add. And then now you're going to see we're going to have copy up here. So if I were to select copy, now it's copying whatever it is. So this is really great. I love using ones like going to the top of your layer or the bottom of your layer, especially if it's a long list. I love having the ability to show and hide the ruler as well. So you can really configure it to what your personal preferences are. Another thing that I highly recommend for people on an iPad is the ability to reconfigure your workspace. So because you're working on an iPad, you have less room. And so I personally have two different views for if I'm working on something like my thumbnails versus if I'm working on something like multiple pages at once. So what I will typically do is I'll go to Windows and then under Workspace, I've set one up for a Gene workspace, which graphic novel. So it's just more like a generic workspace for myself. And then I have one specifically for thumbs. So just to kind of show you my thumbs workspace, I'm going to convert it. So you can see it's much more minimal and it gives you a lot more area to work with because space matters a lot when you're on an iPad. And then all I would do is once I'm done with that, I would just convert it back to the GM workspace. You can also convert your settings if you want to. It's really up to you. But if you do want to save a new workspace, you can just go to your Windows workspace and then click on Register Workspace. So after you've set up all your windows, that's a really great thing that you can add to. Highly recommend it. Can save a lot of time, especially if you just want more space. And then finally, one more thing, which I personally find to be super convenient. This is actually an iPad specific setting, not something just for the Clip Studio Paint, but it's this little toggle thing right here. And basically what this is, it's called the Assistive Touch tool. It's an accessibility tool, but I found it super useful for myself and being able to have certain customizations. So for an example, if I were to click on this tool right here, now you'll see I have a ton of different preset options that I added to it. So if I go to the control center, for an example, I can quickly adjust by brightness. I can toggle through audio settings if I want, set the camera all from a single screen without having to exit out of apps. They can also do things like if you want to quickly open an app, you can set it as well. So that's really convenient if you just kind of want quick access to other areas of your iPad when you're in Clip Studio Paint. And just really fast to show you, if you want to get that set up, basically all you want to do is you want to go to your settings on your iPad. Under accessibility, there's going to be a touch option. And then from here, you just want to turn on that assistive touch. And then you'll be able to customize all the different things in this menu to make it a lot easier if you're working in Clip Studio Paint or just in different apps in general on the iPad. So yeah, I think that's it for me. Let me stop sharing and I'll pass it on back to you, Jeff.
Okay, awesome, cool. Thanks a lot, Brigitte. That was a ton of information. Great to see how you set up your iPad. That's one great thing about Clip Studio too, is there are some specific things to the iPad, but generally the port of the interface from the desktop to the iPad is pretty darn seamless. It's not like some other programs that lose a ton of functionality on the port to the iPad. So it's a really doable workflow. So thanks on that, Brigitte. Just so everybody knows, sometimes these lunch and learns go an hour. We do have the space until 2. So if you can stay, we will just keep barreling through. And again, if you have questions, we're monitoring the chat. But if you don't get them answered today, please do post them in the Clip Studio Cafe or drop in on the Zoom hours. All right, next up, Ken Ralston, exporting to Photoshop and InDesign and how those function in his workflow.
All right, I hope you can hear me. I'll share my screen. There we are. Let me just get that out of the way. All right, so I have started a early reader graphic novel written by one of our KCU members, Tanya Elchuk, and I want to keep my my layout fairly simple. So I have a guideline template that I've set up. Then what I did is I took that and created a thumbnail page for 17 pages. The whole book is going to be 40 plus pages long. But I just wanted like I tend to work traditional. I was working traditionally with my thumbnails. I do it on a piece of paper and scan it. But I love the Clip Studio drawing tool so much that I've switched to digital for my thumbnails. And then I discovered the panel making tools in Clip Studio. So I have fallen in love there. If you don't know what those are, they are down here. And with my thumbnails, you can quickly just kind of set up my panel layout, drop in each one where you think it might be. I'm not being super accurate on this because they're just the thumbnails. What that does is it creates a basically a folder if you're coming from Adobe like I am, where you have each panel is masked out so that you can draw inside without going outside of the panel. And then what I did as I laid out my page, I stuck each set of the page into each set of panels into a page folder so that I could access each page as desired, keep it organized. From there, once I had all my thumbnails drawn out, I saved it as a JPEG and selected each page and blew it up into a Photoshop file where I could start refining the drawings, going in, redrawing the panels, using my guidelines to get the panels more accurate. And then I took it back to InDesign. And I've lost InDesign, 1 second. Where I could drop in each Photoshop file as a page within InDesign. InDesign is a whole separate thing. I'm sure a lot of you know how to use it. So what I've been doing is I've been going back and forth between Photoshop and Clip Studio, using the clips, saving it in Clip Studio as a Photoshop file so that InDesign can handle it a little better. There is some issues. Clip Studio does not optimize for Photoshop, so I have to quite often go in and resave it in Photoshop in order to make sure that it is optimized for InDesign. Another issue is that if you add a layer effect, such as, going to show you Photoshop here for a second, this adding an extra line around the speech bubble, Clip Studio does not know how to handle that. So if I take this file now back into Clip Studio, that just disappears. And when I resave it in Clip Studio, take it back into Photoshop, I have to make sure that I re-add the effect in. So it's a bit of a pain in the butt, but I am learning. I'm slowly transitioning from Photoshop over to Clip Studio, but I've kind of been doing Adobe products for so long that it's hard to let go of. So I just know them better when it comes to the intricacies of InDesign. I'm faster working that way. So I'm reluctant to give it up. But yeah, that is kind of, in a nutshell, as quick as possible, how I've been transitioning back and forth between the two.
Awesome, cool. Thanks, Ken. There was a question about optimization. We'll get to that in the Q&A. We have one last presenter. Alberto Gonzalez is going to talk about gradient maps, not color gradients, but gradient maps, which is totally, and I know nothing about, so I'm looking forward to it.
That's right, Jeff. Thank you. Okay, let's see if, okay, we wait for Ken to end up the sharing so I can share mine.
Sorry, I'm looking to find my screen share. Where is, oh, it's up there. There it is.
All right, let's see. Let's see if I can pull this up. Okay. Yeah, let's hope. All right, let's see. All right, that should. You're looking. It's okay.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can see.
Yep.
Okay. Yes, I'm just confused. All right. So I just shared this because this is something that I wish I will have learned earlier, because grading maps is something that's been a function that has been around for a while. It's in Photoshop, it's in Procreate, it's in Clip Studio, of course. But over time, I never get around to see what it was about. So one day I just decided to study it and to see how it could be useful for me on my own work. And so in that way, I just started to to see what it was about, because actually what it this we need to start first with the concept of mapping applied to gradients, which is like match one value to another. And in the case of gradient maps, it's two or more colors that replace the image's original colors, the images that is underneath, because gradient maps is like a correction, like an adjustment layer that you put on top. And whatever luminance values your source image has, the gradient map is going to map the colors in the gradient to those values. So in that way, the darkish color shades get mapped to darker values of the target image, and likewise, lighter color shades get mapped to lighter values. What we have here is just a typical grayscale ramp, and we're going to be the same grayscale ramp, but with that gray map applied. It's way we can use color combinations. We can do quick adjustments for our images. This can also work under color images, but for simplicity, I'm just going to demo this thing with grayscale, with the grayscale ramps and grayscale images. So now to demonstrate, this is the gradient map, a correction layer applied. This is without it and with it. And we click on okay, and now these gradient maps are in Clip Studio are available as correction layers. Where it says layer, new correction layer, and we see the array of options here. This is gradient map, but we already have this one here in place. So what I did was like to set a shade of red and just put at the beginning, the middle, of the end, the same tone of red, but with different values, with about 30% of the value and about 60% of the value of it and 90% of the value. So I just have a gradient with 3 steps that maps itself to whatever the values on the grayscale on the grayscale image underneath are is. So I just tried to make it as less complex as possible, just to grasp the whole general concept. But so you see, we have like 3 different versions with different copies of the same grayscale ramp, but with gradient maps we can assign different values to a single source. So if we need one to resolve the mood, or we need to find to try out some color combination because we're really not decided on which color palettes to use on a project we're doing, and so maybe we can just set up a grayscale image underneath, and then just throw a gradient map over it, and just make a lot of adjustments and to see what happens. So yeah, in the same, for instance, this gradient here, I just choose like a red, a greenish, but a greenish theme, but I also could also call it to red and blue. Actually, this is a bunch of maps I downloaded from Clip Studio a while ago, but you can also create your own. And for instance, here you can even find tuning here with a mixing rate curve, and just to you can do you can adjust it as much as you want to see what how it affects the whole process and the whole end result. But yeah, it's very versatile in that respect. And obviously, not only gradient maps by itself can be useful, but also blending modes applied to gradient maps can yield different results on the overall image. For instance, this is the very same gradient map applying to the very same grayscale ramp, but here the blending mode is changing on each of them. For instance, this one is set up to normal blending mode. This one's set to color, which makes the subtraction a cool makes colors or color values pop more or less on screen, tones which actually uh, focuses on the highlights values. So it really, if you know how to use it on the direction you want to go, this will be a very useful tool to figure out color palettes and to color combinations and just like a way like to do it right quick. And for demo, I had this image that I done a while ago, which I decided to use as practice for this subject, which is actually I just managed to do all the values on grayscale, but on the same way you could take out a color image and just tone it down to grayscale, but by reducing the saturation to 0 and just mix and match things with it to see, for instance, what could we do, for instance, on the background. I just made some adjustments to create this grain map that brings this, for instance, the darkest tones on the grayscale is mapped to this dark shade of teal, and the middle tones are more into this greenish color, and the clearest or the lightest tones are mapped to this yellowish color here. So that's how the map acts over the grayscale layer that is like this background layer. Likewise with the school there, I also added another map of darker tones, but by in the same way I could also change it to another kind of map tone if I want like to alter the end result, and this might be set to color as well, and also I can go and see what happens if I change the blending mode. Actually, this gives you room for a lot of experimentation. It's like a way that you can actually try to do interesting things in a rather quick way, and the way you can also try to mix and match different styles and to see how the overall composition goes, because this is very interesting, especially if you're a color challenged person like me. So, but I don't know, again, you can even create ghost effect and create the color, and you can actually go crazy with all these things. But yeah, overall, that's basically like a quick rundown I wanted to make about the whole grading map functionality that is available on Clip Studio and Procreate and other programs. And so there you go. There you have it.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, Alberto. That's very technical stuff. But really interesting to see how you're applying it to the various layers of your grayscale.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. So that does it with the presentations. That was awesome. And now we can open it up to Q&A. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show one. Alberto, can you stop sharing your screen? That would be great. Thank you. I'm going to address the first question that already got answered in the chat, but in case you didn't know and you're trying to look for and find the Clip Studio Cafe, there is so much in Mighty Networks. Are you seeing my screen? Are you seeing my web browser? Yes, you are.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So the way to find it, if I'm at the top and this is the feed, an easy way is just to search Kids Comics Unite at the top. If I put in Clip Studio, it should pop up. If I could type, it would work better. See, sometimes this is one thing. I'm typing now with a stylus in my hand, and that gets in the way. Anyway, so you see the space Clip Studio Cafe pops up. The other place, if you don't search for it, is to go down in the navigation bar on the left of the screen, scroll all the way down to the bottom. Look at all these threads. This is probably going to get reorganized, as Jan has mentioned previously, but Clip Studio is down here under groups, okay? And if you click in there, it is set up such that I need to approve members. I will do that very quickly. It's not instant, but that's how you join the Clip Studio Cafe. And again, we're going to cover anything that we didn't get to today in the Q&A, and we're going to do it on an ongoing basis, either through the chat or the live Zoom events. So there is that. All right. Who's got burning questions? Anybody either want to put up a hand, or we'll go to the chat and pull up some of the questions that I've been noticing there.
Really quickly, I'm going to say, Jeff, that I have to jump off the call really soon, but everybody
Okay.
else can stay and keep talking. I have kept track of some of the questions that were asked a little while ago, so I'm going to paste them in the chat.
Okay.
So you have them right up the bottom. But I'll let you decide how you want to handle it.
Yeah, okay, that sounds great. I saw that Maria had her hand up first, physically. So what's your question?
I was wondering, for the color demo was so interesting and helpful, but I am brand new to the program, and I was a little confused as to all the things that you were clicking on in order to get the results and like the layers and stuff. Would you mind maybe going over it again? Maybe just talking about where to click on things for someone who's really new to it.
Sorry, that was for me? Or
I think that's for you,
I think
Brady.
so. I think because you were doing the color, right?
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I clicked on a lot of things. Was there anything in particular you were really interested in having me click on again? Why don't I go?
I got like how you're going through layer styles. But some of the other things, when you were jumping around, I think there was a question about the transparency on some of the brushes and how some of the brushes work or how to select them. And then just clicking on and off the different layers. I guess just the process in general. I'm used to Procreate, and it just looks very different. So I'm trying to get a feel for how, if I wanted to experiment with the basics of the program, I would go about it.
Sure. Honestly enough, it is in many ways very similar to Procreate, right? Like you've got the same kinds of layer commands and layers. When it comes to brushes and the way the brushes I'm using work, my brushes are the product of years and years and years of weird trial and error and little fiddles here and there. And so I've kind of like landed on something that works for me. And so I tend to use just this hard brush here, which I can kind of fiddle the edge with by fiddling with the hardness. Yes.
Could you share your screen?
Oh, I thought I
Oh,
was
wait, you are sharing your
Yes, yes.
screen. He is, I'm sorry.
cool.
I have
No
so many
worries.
things open right now.
No worries at all. Yeah, so anyways, I use this for painting and for line art. I can fiddle with the edge by playing with the hardness, which is over here in the settings, which you can get to by clicking the little wrench icon, I believe. I just have that up. I can't remember how to get to it originally. Right, so I can have anything from a super hard edge to a super soft edge. And its size is actually controlled by tilt. So I can tilt and get a super thin line or a super thick line. Like I said, I clicked on a lot of things. The layer selector tool should be in the upper left. It'll be under operation. And then beside it, there'll be select layer. Operation has a bunch of cool stuff too. Oh no, it is under operation. Yeah, operation select layer. Right. I fiddled with its settings and then I made my own. It's called select layer 2.
If I may, Maria, I've used Procreate too, and it is it is very good at staying out of the way and having the tools in one place. One of the advantages of Clip Studio is that you can customize the interface to your heart's delight. And there are so many tools. And one of the reasons I like it over Procreate is because I like to have the tools there on my screen at all times. It will take a little while to figure out where the tools are. As Brigitte showed, you can have this thing called the quick access palette where you can drag your shortcuts to your tools into that palette specifically. So you know exactly where they are and only the ones that you use most of the time. And I don't know if you can make it to the Zooms or not, but happy to show you more over time, because it will take a little bit of time to figure it all out. But also check out the links if you join the Clip Studio Cafe, which I think you already did. I think we have 3 new members already today. So I've put some links in there, and especially the Celsius site, Clip Studio's official site, has some really bite-sized tutorials about specific things like where to find your tools.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Shall we go on to another question? Do we have any hands up? Somebody asked earlier about where to find the models that I was showing. I pulled out some age-specific models. I'll go back to share my screen. So, okay, and I think you're seeing that. So let me go back to my clip. And yeah, so this is the material panel on the left here. And if you unfurl the 3D section of it, these models under body type are stock and came with the program. The folder above it is a folder that I created myself. And where I got these poses or these sized models is at the Clip Asset store. And these were all free. There's a host of free resources on that. I'll also link to that in the Clip Studio Cafe. If we go to Open Clip Studio, if you see File here, and you go down to the bottom and it says Open Clip Studio, it's going to bring up the other program that sort of comes with Clip Studio Paint. And it's kind of weird. Everybody talks about Clip Studio and they think of Clip Studio Paint because that is the program that you actually draw in. But what I'm showing you now is sort of the interface, which you may have seen before. And this is sort of a portal that goes to Clip Studio. And if I go down to Clip Studio Assets, you see on the left here, what it's going to do is it's going to open up the Clip Studio Asset Store. It'll take a second and hopefully I'm signed in already, but this is the Asset Store and you can download all kinds of stuff here. You can see there's a whole bunch of stuff that are free. There are also things that you can buy with Clippy points, and then gold points are something different. Gold points are things that you actually pay money to get and then purchase assets with. Clippy points, you sort of earn them by posting assets of your own. It's kind of like a barter system. Anyways, that's where you can get a whole bunch of stuff, and that's where I got those particular models.
Oh, hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
Also, while you had your screen up, just quickly go over how to set colors for some of the tools. We had a question about that.
Okay, let me share my screen again. Can you remind me what in particular about setting colors is? Is it like using the, I've got a couple color tools here. I keep my color slider open. And I keep my color history open. And I also have the color wheel up here. And you can see these are all little separate palettes that you can put anywhere you want on the screen. You could drag them into one of these sections if you wanted to. and keep it open there.
Just real fast, I think it's
Yeah.
actually like setting the tool. So for example, you have your, like your objects, your vector arrays, they have like a different color background
Oh, right.
on itself. Like, how would you do that?
Yeah, okay. If let's just go from, if I've already dragged a tool into my quick access bar, I'm going to highlight this rectangle, which doesn't have a color. I right click it and I go to subtool settings. And it brings up this dialog box. There's a check mark here that says background color of icon. I click on that. I don't want it to be black. And I'm going to choose red. Click OK. And now, yes, that's okay. You'll see that it has changed to a red icon. Does that answer the question, Brigitte?
Yep, I believe so.
Yep. Okay. Cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Again, I just want to say, like that 3D stuff that I showed, I saw some people in chat said, I would never use that. I showed you a really simple example just for time's sakes today of a pose, which is like, the pose was like this. It was pretty basic. But if for instance, I had something like this, like with more foreshortening or something like that, and some people have difficulty with that, or the body was really contorted in a way that I couldn't really figure out in 3D space, the 3D tool could be a useful tool for some people. And also to that point, you can also drag in set pieces. So if you want to, create a room and be able to fly a camera around that room to explore different angles before drawing your character into it, you can do that. You can create with primitives, like you can build walls and use blocks to represent couches. But if you're going to do a lot of 3D sort of building, it might be worth your time to actually build that stuff in a program like Blender first, which is specifically built for making models easier. And then you can import those models into Clip Studio to use as reference. There is also a program called Clip Studio Modeler. And what that does is, one of the things it does is, if you want a model that you've dragged in, say an OBJ file is a type of 3D model, can be dragged straight into Clip Studio, but you can't keep it in Clip's material library unless you bring it in through the other Clip Studio program called Clip Studio Modeler. There's a whole bunch of stuff to learn about 3D, and we can definitely talk about that more in the cafe if people are interested. Yeah, Roger points out that there are a ton of sites with free 3D assets. Are there 3D assets that would work in Photoshop? Yes, I don't really work that much in Photoshop anymore. It does have 3D functions as well. I don't know if it was breaking some of it out into its other program called Adobe Dimension. I don't know exactly what the situation is there. The other thing is, like, you could just, if you really do want to use 3D as reference, you could just build it all in Blender and take a screenshot. It might be a lot faster to do it that way than to bring it into Clip Studio. One thing that is kind of cool about Clip Studio is that it has a lighting function as well, which I didn't get to. But those 3D models, I can then put a light over it and it will show you the shadow, and you can move that light around. I don't know, has anybody played with the new auto shading feature in Clip Studio 2? Alberto, have you?
Yeah, I did. They just did some light tries, but I think as a concept it's interesting, but I think it needs work.
Yeah.
I say, yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand how it would work. Essentially what it does is you draw this virtual lamp, you put it on your canvas beside your 2D character, and it's supposed to show you where the shadow is going to be. But it's a 2D image, so how is it going to tell how that light falls across the form? You know, if it's a spherical form, there's going to be light fall off. And I don't know how it's going to calculate that from a 2D image. Whereas if you use the 3D model, it does have that data to show you how the light falls off.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I think it makes like some good approximation. Actually has two nodes. It has shading, and I recall there's like more painterly type grading. I don't remember, but yeah, because I was really interested to see how that thing worked, but so far, I don't know. Maybe I need to test it some more, but I feel like yes, it's not really that much of a problem solver actually.
Yeah. Brigitte points out that, you know, you can also use something like SketchUp for 3D. SketchUp has a function where it will actually sort of extract line art from the 3D models themselves. And I've seen some webcomics artists use that for a really quick fix. So some people don't even do any drawing. They'll just extract lines from the 3D model if it's a background asset. And then they have their buildings. I personally wouldn't use that because I think depending on who does it, it can look really mechanical, and that takes the point out of drawing. So
You can also make the lines not be straight. You can make them like textured too. So like if you're in SketchUp, you can make them actually look like a pencil brush and stuff. So it actually looks very organic. It's really, really cool. One of my favorite features of SketchUp.
but it doesn't have that I just had 4 cups of coffee wobble to the line.
They
does it?
do actually. There are
They
ways
can?
that you can
Really?
configure, yeah, the outlines to the 3D models to look like actual like wobbly brush strokes and stuff.
Oh,
Takes a little modification, but it's really cool.
I stand corrected. See, when I talked about Vince in the cafe, you know, I was picturing him as a 10-year-old who's a techno geek that's probably all over this stuff. And he's probably like, you know, okay, I use 3D, but I'm not using Stable Diffusion. I'm not using Dolly. But the purists out there would say, don't use any of it. Just learn how to draw, man. And it's like, yep, that too. Do we have any more questions? All right, Marie.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
I'm like beyond newbie, like just starting trying this because I was just trying to learn drawing. But but I have a question that if you hand draw a figure on paper and you scan or import it into Clip Studio, do you have to draw over all the lines in Clip Studio so that you can fill it and TLAS it and all that without it looking really kindergarten?
So you're hoping that, yeah, I mean, I think the question or the answer would be yes, because it needs to have that information, those preferably vectors to fill into. It's probably not going to detect it. I mean, what you could try, and I don't know if it would work. Do you know the change opacity function? Change to opacity function?
Nope.
Well, all right, let me share my screen a second here.
Because I tried the magic wand tool selection and all that, and I was able to get it to color like in the lines and all, but the lines aren't something that it recognizes really. I mean,
Yeah.
it selected the character, but it didn't seem to recognize the internal lines as lines.
Didn't I? You know what? This is probably going to take a little more time to answer than we have. So maybe we can follow up in Clip Studio. But my thinking was that, you know, if you bring in a scan, you can drop out all the white space with the change to opacity feature. And then you would have a raster-based image, but potentially you could then change that raster into a vector and use that. I don't know. It would it would be a good experiment to try in the cafe.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. Yeah, I see Maria's asking the trace function Illustrator. I don't know Illustrator.
Hey, I have a question.
Yeah.
For anyone that's used Procreate, they have a function where if you're drawing a line or a circle and you're just drawing along and you want it to be straight or a perfect circle, you hold down and then it pops to that perfect circle or that perfect straight line. Is there a setting that Clip Studio does that? And I'm not talking about the line tool in there. I want to be able to draw the line and then it pops straight. Does anyone?
Yeah. That's kind of an awesome function. Brigida, do you know that answer?
Yeah, I do. You can't. Honestly, that's the biggest downfall, because I love Procreate too, and that's like one of my favorite features for it. There's ways that you can kind of fake it, but it's not the same. It's like you can use the shift to straighten the lines, but it's not really like snapping it. And you could use like the circle or even like the speech bubble tool, but it's not really like it doesn't have the same effects, unfortunately. I would love it if it did.
Yeah, there are no really exact equivalent on Clip Studio of that Procreate function. What Clip Studio has is special rollers like parallel, root curves, concentric circles, and all that. That's very interesting on their own. But no, that's like an exact version of what Procreate does. No.
Okay. All right. Thanks. And then I just have a tip, an actual tip.
Hey.
I guess I press hard on my pen and my tablet, and I keep having to change out my nibs.
Yeah.
And they make third-party metal nibs that you can get on Amazon. I don't know how they would work on a Cintiq. I don't know if that would be a good idea for that. But if you have a tablet, I completely recommend getting a metal nib because they don't wear down.
Joshua, are you drawing on like a plastic tablet?
Yeah, like the Wacom, like the
yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's a good tip. I don't know what the ratio of people drawing on plastic to screen tablets are, but nibs can make a huge difference. I'm drawing on a screen, and I like to use felt nibs just for the feel of the drag. Yeah, there are some links there. Okay.
I also would like to shout out, if you're somebody who suffers from repetitive strain injuries, get one of these. It will literally save your life. It'll take like a little bit of time to get used to, but the thicker they are, the easier it is on your arm. And it has saved me so much pain. Like before, I was getting pain all the time, especially because the Apple Pencil, as compared to the Wacom pen, just for comparison, it's like the Wacom has a thicker grip and the Apple Pencil is like really thin. So you can see kind of how, how they differ. So definitely if you can get just like a regular pencil grip, it can be like $1. It's super cheap, but that's also really helpful.
Brigida, is it easy to pull that thing off when you need to charge your pen?
Well, I am always smart. So when I'm done, I always charge it. So
okay. That's one thing. When I went to the iPad that had the magnetic thing, I was like, oh, finally, I don't have to stick it in and remember to charge it because it just stores there.
Such an awful choice, honestly. Whoever made it that you have to charge it like from the side and there's no way that you can just plug it in. Like some of the older ones had the plug-in at the end of it. And then with the updates, like it'd be nice to be able to do both, but yeah, it not super great.
It's clean. It's all clean. No ports. Forget ports. Don't plug anything in. All right. Do we have we're past 2:00 right now, and we could talk all day. But for recording's sake, we should probably adjourn soon. Are there any more questions, comments, concerns? Does everybody know where to go to join the cafe if you're not already there?
Thank you so much for having the presentation, for sharing all this info.
Oh, you're welcome. There's a wealth of information out there. Again, the stuff you can learn online, look at those links, and the live stuff is fun too, because you can sort of ask questions and somebody can demo it for you in the moment. So, all right.
Thanks so much, everyone.
On that
Lots of
note-
presentations.
Thanks, Jeff.
On that note, thank you, everybody, and we'll look forward to seeing you at KCU.
Great job hosting.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye.